So welcome everybody to Inspire Care 360, and today I have Chanie Wilschanski, and I want to make sure I get it right, but Chanie is a person I've gotten to know over the past 6 months. I've participated with her on a number of leadership elements and things that she has done for her audience and her people, as well as we've talked a number of times about different director initiatives. She happens to be a phenomenal coach in the area of director training, director development, and overall center development based out of the administration of the services. The reason we're having this call today for our members, as well as others in the ether out there, is because we think this is a huge opportunity. As many of you know, I'm not only the founder of Inspire Care 360, but I own and operate 4 of my own centers. And in those 4 centers, I have a model where I actually have more than one director. I actually have 2 directors per center. And that's part of the model that I've instilled because of the industry has a lot of challenges wrought with the fact of recruiting, retaining, and keeping a very strong director. So we wanted to talk with Chanie today, and I keep on saying Connie, but
okay.
But I want to talk to her today about a number of different things. But welcome. How are you?
I'm good, Tony. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and connect and just collaborate and talk about this great topic.
Yeah, wonderful. So today our topic is going to be around, underneath the subset of parent and staff communication, we are really going to narrow down to an area that is problematic. I see in a lot of centers. I've seen in my own centers, and I've talked to a lot of different members, and they have discussed it too. And that is teachers, as well as directors, taking responsibility for what's going on in their center. Whether it's responsibility for why things are occurring, such as turnover in the center, whether it's responsibility for how a communication occurred with a family or a parent. Oftentimes we see that there's a blame game that happens in the center where it's like, not my fault, not my job. Hey, I walked through one of my centers the other day and I noticed that there was a water bucket sitting around wildly against our regulations for the state. And immediately everybody's like, well, I wasn't the last one to have it. I didn't have it. And I'm like, I don't care who has it.
Who had it? Just get rid of it.
Just get rid of it. That kind of thing. Is if you see something bad, give it. So, before we get started with that specific topic, could you give us a little more background on yourself and tell us, for those people who haven't met you, I know there's a bunch of people who have, you've really been making a great impact, and I'm so thrilled about having you here. But can you tell us a little bit more about you personally, and then how this sort of brought us together at this point today?
Yeah. So my story really starts a really long time ago, where I taught toddlers for 8 years. And the entire approach when I was teaching toddlers is I in general, I'm obsessed with solutions and system-based thinking. And so everything that I created in my classroom was always around not who is at fault for this problem, or, how do we solve this problem, but what system solves this problem? What do I need to create in the environment to solve this problem so it doesn't happen again? And so I've always been asking myself those questions, even as a teacher. And so that's just the mindset that my frame works in. I think in models, I think in systems. And now that I'm working with directors, mainly directors and some owners as well, my entire approach is root cause analysis, diagnostic, and then what is the model or system that we put in place to solve that problem. So many times we're solving the wrong problem because we haven't got to the root cause of the issue. So that's just a little bit about how I think and just how I started working with directors.
Which is fantastic. And I know a lot of people understand it, but let's talk just a quick second about it, because I use the term all the time. But root cause analysis, what is your layman's term definition?
Root cause analysis is, I think, a great coach is the person that asks questions that the client doesn't know how to ask or doesn't see that they're supposed to be asking. And when I think of root cause analysis, I think people think that they know where the problem is coming from. They think that they know this is the problem I'm trying to solve and this is the strategy that I need. But I think a great mentor and a great coach, and this is why it's so important to always invest in yourself, actually asks you questions that you never thought to ask. And that's what I define root cause analysis as, the questions that no one's going to ask. because it's terrifying, but I'm going to ask you those terrifying questions because that's how we're going to get to the root cause of the problem.
Well, and I think you're spot on. I'm glad you bring it up that way, because oftentimes as owners, one of the things that we do is we've been like, hey, we've seen this rodeo before.
Yeah,
so
there
we
you go.
do what the answer needs to be. And then we provide addictive, or where it's like, this is what we have to do here with her, or she needs to be doing this. And we assume oftentimes what is that root cause, but we're really not looking at it. We're just looking at it from our history, and we're taking, which is admirable. We're taking our best mindset. But when you talk about root cause, I think it's absolutely critical. So when we look at why parents or staff leave an organization, why a problem occurs, why there was a CPS call, why something occurred, getting into and doing, like you said, you coach, you ask the tough questions, you wait and get the tough answers. So I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, I call it chunking up a level. Like if I brought you up a level and had your mind looking at it from this perspective, does the problem still exist in the way that you see it? It could be you still see it in the same arena, but more often than not, when you chunk up a level and you ask a different question, and now I've brought you from a different angle, the problem doesn't exist anymore. And that way, a different problem actually exists. And then if we solve that problem, the ripple effect solves so many other issues. And it's really hard to do that because it's the classic, if you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label. And that's why you need to invest in people that will help you, even if it means a tribe of people that will look at you and say, hey, you're inside the bottle. Let me tell you what's on the label over here. The label is saying you need help in this area.
Right. No, that's great. And I'm glad the reason I want to define a little bit further is because from the topic you're talking about today, the root cause is really critical.
Yeah.
So when you also talk about then taking it to the next step of diagnostic, you started getting into there. So why don't you explain a little bit about what your thought process is around diagnostic?
Yeah, so the typical diagnostic that I use is my School of Excellence diagnostic, which is the 3 pillars of building a school of excellence, which is your SOP, your LOP, and your DOP, which is the abbreviations that I created. So your DOP is your daily operating principles, anything that has to do with the day-to-day operations of running a childcare or preschool location. Your LOPs are your leadership operating principles, how you show up as a leader with the stakeholders, the parents, the teachers, and yourself. And then your standard operating principles is how you create standards in your school, which are in 3 buckets of communication, school philosophy, and classroom management. And so when I'm creating a diagnostic, I'm diagnosing these 3 pillars to build a school of excellence, because you need those 3 pillars. Now, depending on what you're diagnosing, if someone's diagnosing the financial health, the child care center, hopefully they're going to use different pillars and different metrics, because you're going to use different metrics. But if you're diagnosing excellence and how to sustain excellence in an organization, I believe that these are the 3 pillars to sustain excellence in a child care or preschool location.
And I'm glad we discussed that, because oftentimes we ask why do we bring a third party in?
Oh, yeah.
Why do we have a third party look at this? And the reason I oftentimes look at when you bring an individual in who specializes, and you hear, kind of going through this, discussion of, the DOP, the
LOP and SOP. My kids call it the SOP, DOP, and LOP.
There you go, SOP, DOP, and LOP. Awesome. That's great.
My kids are integrated in our business.
Yeah, it's great. I can hear them in the background a little bit too. So that's fantastic.
They're right over there on the wall. They're with me all the time.
Of course. It's wonderful. But I think what's important is a lot of times I also put the challenges being in the forest for the trees, as the cliche is.
Yeah.
And we're living in our environment. We are oftentimes trying to analyze our own environment while we're in it. And it's so difficult because it's difficult to have more than what I call that 180-degree perspective. You have this perspective where you can see here to here, but you really don't see your blind spots beside you or behind you.
Yeah.
When you have someone like Chanie come in and look at things like this, what I've noticed is the ability is to be able to do a diagnostic and have a sense of getting to some of the challenges, the root cause, and then looking at how do we build up from that based on looking at the whole model. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and I also think it's, again, just picking back on what you're saying, it's high performers seek accountability, they seek coaches. I am constantly investing in a coach, constantly. I just got off the phone with my coach. Like, I am constantly investing in someone, because, especially in high performance, because someone who is truly chosen an accelerated path to excellence, if you ask them, what has been the single biggest reason that you have seen such dramatic success? 9 out of 10 times they're going to say mentorship. I invested in a coach. I had someone pull me out of, the pit that I was in consistently. Ask anyone. They will tell you it's mentorship, hands down, because that is the accelerated path to excellence. So someone who's watching this and wants to create excellence and wants to, in any area of your life, health, wellness, business, relationships, anything, spouses, you hire someone who's going to help you, you are going to bullet across to the finish line a lot faster than anyone else.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons that we're bringing resources like Chanie to you today. So let's dive into the topic a little bit.
Yeah.
As we started talking about it, the topic is really about responsibility underneath the whole idea of communications from parents as well as staff, and how a director manages the element of responsibility, and also the fact about blame and the fact that people like to pass that hot potato. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you a little bit. Maybe you can tell us a little bit what your thoughts are and your approach are when you've seen this, and maybe some examples.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is something that I talk about a lot. It's like a thing that I've coined, which is the 4 shields of a difficult conversation. And what's important to understand before we get into tactics and strategy, which everyone loves to jump into that swimming pool first, is first we have to understand what are the shields that people enter difficult conversations with. We all do this in different areas of our life. So this is not something that is niche specific in early childhood. You do this in every area of your life. So the 4 shields are crying, blaming, deflection, and victimhood. Today we're going to talk about blame, but those are the 4 shields. And so at any given moment, when you're in a challenging conversation with a parent, a face-off with a director, a face-off with a teacher, she is putting on, or he is putting on, one of those shields to protect themselves. Now, the most common one and the most destructive and toxic one is blame. And so that's why I'm glad we're talking about this now. But if we go even further down memory lane, all the way to when you were 3 or 4 years old, blame is the number one strategy you use to survive your life, especially if you grow up with siblings. Who spilled the milk? Who broke the vase? Where's mommy's keys? Who didn't make their bed yet? Why does it smell here? Who spilled, why are the eggs on the floor, right? It's always who did this. So if you grew up with siblings, I grew up with 8 of them, blame is something you are going to use as a strategy to get out of any kind of pressure. He did it. It wasn't me. No, he did it. No, he did it, right? We all do that. Then now let's move up when you're a little baby. Now when you get older, right? So then when you get older and you're a teenager, who brought in the car? Who smashed it? Who rear-ended? Who did? Oh, it wasn't me. It was him. Oh, I didn't do it. I didn't touch the cart, right? Because we don't want to get in trouble. Then when you get married, it goes even further, right? Who left the stove on? Who's this? Who forgot to get the kids? Who didn't? It's always about who did it. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want you to realize that it's such a normal thing to shift responsibility and to shift blame. Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm going to give you some language of how to re-enter that conversation so that the person is, that script gets flipped. And so the person understands that you're not taking blame as an answer, but accountability is going to be the name of the game here.
Great. And I love how you say re-enter the conversation. You know, when you look at these, there's many great books out there, such as Crucial Conversations, and, there's a number of them that really talk about it. And, at the end of the day, when it really comes down to it, our whole business is all about conversation.
All day. That's all you do.
Yeah.
You get paid to talk to people.
Yeah. How do we communicate? Yeah. So, well, why don't you, so start to lay out for us a little bit when you're dealing with the situation. You're obviously talking about the 4 shields, and blame as being one of the key fundamental components of it. So if you are, let's say, an owner, and you're an owner who is dealing with a director, and a director is either laying blame on a teacher, or a director is simply saying, hey, this teacher is blaming this issue on this, or saying this is this, and this is the why we can't get anything done. How do you handle that? What is your starting process? Where do you start with the center?
So the first starting process to understand the difference between blame and accountability. When there's blame, there's no learning. So as much as our gut instinct is to want to put blame because we want to make ourselves feel better because we're uncomfortable right now, the first thing you want to tell yourself, if I'm blaming, there's not going to be any learning. And the point of entering this conversation is so that there should be learning, so that it shouldn't happen again. right? And so when you think about a culture of accountability, with what you really do want to see is accountability means to be counted on, right? I can count on this person. Blame is to find fault with. This person is going to be at fault with. And by the way, for whoever's watching, we do have a resource that we're going to be giving you guys that's going to walk you through this also. So don't feel the need to be like scrambling and taking notes kind of thing, because I kind of break this all down in a great PDF as well. So when you're starting to reflect as a school leader, as an owner, the first questions you want to be asking yourself is, one, do I have a role in this situation? If you are part of the conversation, that means you have some kind of role in it. It could be something as simple as you didn't clearly communicate the standard. It could be something as simple as you didn't follow up when you promised you were going to follow up because life got in the way or something like that. So always remember, it doesn't mean that the answer is yes, but just ask yourself, do I have a role in this problem, right? Am I a little bit part of this problem, right? The other thing you want to be asking is, did I take an action where at the time I thought it was the right action, but now it had these unintended consequences, right? So I thought at the time that it was good for me to keep quiet and ignore it. But now that it's over here, I actually realized I actually should have spoken sooner.
Right.
The reason you want to ask yourself this question is because the moment that you take responsibility, people are reflections. You are mirrors. The moment you take responsibility is the moment the other person sees it's okay to take responsibility. It's okay to be vulnerable. But if you're the leader, you always take the first step. It's follow the leader.
So that's a really good point. And
Yeah.
I think I want to make sure to sort of underscore what you just said there. Oftentimes, because with IC360 and the way that I have looked at my own centers, what we oftentimes look at is really about culture. And culture, we can talk about, have 5 more conversations about it.
A billion. Everything is culture.
Yeah. And one of the things, though, Chanie, about the culture is that culture is established by your leader. And your leader's tone then becomes it. In other words, if people are oftentimes pushed up and backed up against the wall, like you said earlier, it's sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're trying to protect themselves. They're going to start either crying, it's going to be a victimhood, but it might be blame, it might be this or that. They are going to do whatever they can to protect themselves. If you have an environment where you're not boxing people into a corner possibly, so they have to leverage blame, that could be a significant element, it seems, to not creating a culture where blame is accepted or going to be used as much.
And it's very difficult to get there because it's not a one-time strategy or a one-time conversation. Right. This is the directors consistently working on themselves and asking themselves questions. It's a daily reflection of, how did I show up today? When someone brought me a problem, did I shift blame or did I take ownership? Did I hold that person accountable or did I ignore it? And if I ignored it, that's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. I could show up differently. But the problem with culture is that we think it's a one-time fix, and it's not. Everything is culture. Did you eat breakfast this morning? That's culture, because if you didn't eat breakfast, you're going to be biting everyone's heads off. Did you use the bathroom today when you were supposed to, or did you hold it in for 4 hours? Guess what? That's culture. You didn't take care of yourself today. You're going to be spewing hate on everyone who didn't do anything wrong to you. So I think, we're going off topic here, so I'll go back in a second to blame, but culture is everything. It's, did you eat breakfast this morning is culture.
Yeah, and you're speaking our language. When you talk about responsibility, and I think where I want to get to with blame is what I call the uncontrolled element of blame.
Yeah.
And what that is yes, if you're a leader and you recognize that you're pushing people up against the wall a little bit and you might get blamed back for it, that's one thing. If you're a leader who demonstrates and feel that you're very open, yet you still either have directors or teachers who are leveraging blame and are not becoming accountable. And I oftentimes like to say is like, I'm a big believer of empowerment, but I'm empowerment with accountability. I'm not just empowerment. But the opportunity, I think, is as an owner, if you see where, you're talking with your directors, you're working with your directors in your centers, you have some great directors, but they come back to you and you're like, okay, we asked for you to move these stations in your center, in your, let's say your toddler room. We asked you to move those stations, get them done. why didn't they get done? Oh, well, because the teacher said this, or the teacher said that, or the teacher said this, said that. There's a bit of the fact that blame is being used by a teacher. Blame is being used a little bit by the director.
Yeah.
And one of those things, it's not my issue. We
Yeah.
talked about coaching to it. So where, I know you've talked about the philosophy of it, but now where do
let's break it down a little bit, right? But I do want to say one thing about what you said is someone can feel that they're empathetic. They can feel that they're doing all the right things. Data will tell you everything. So a culture of blame is data. If teachers are still blaming, that means you're not truly doing what you're supposed to be doing in your environment. So you can think that you're bringing in a lot of money. Your bank account will tell you if you're really bringing in a lot of money. You can think that you filled up your car with gas. Your car will tell you if you actually have gas. So feeling something is actually not data, and that doesn't serve you as an owner. Look at the data. What your people are saying and what your environment actually looks like is a direct mirror of how you're actually showing up. So if we're trying to shift the blame, we start with the 6 simple words is let's discuss what we can control. And so the conversation is always going to be directed and channeled to let's discuss what we can control. So a scenario that typically, goes itself is like, the owner will come over and tell, let's say a director, and she'll say something like, I need those progress reports. They're, past deadline or something like that. And the director will say, well, I can't do that. Jen was supposed to do that and she was supposed to finish the report and she didn't get it in on time. So I can't give it to you. Right.
Sounds common.
Right. So the first response is, I hear you. We're not going to be talking about Jen. And then you say the 6 words, let's discuss what we can control. But then the director is not going to like what you said. So she's going to rally back. I told you I can't control anything. It's not my fault. It's Jen's fault. It's this one's fault. It's that one's fault, right? She's putting on the shield even stronger now, right? You need to help her take that shield down, right? But at the same time, you need to keep the conversation open. And so you could say something like, I hear you again. This conversation is only going to be focused on me and you, because we need to discuss what we can control, because I don't want to talk about things that we can't control. So there are things that we can control, which is our reactions and certain parts of the progress report we are in control of. So let's sit down, pen and paper. Let's come up with options. Yeah. And you literally take out a pen and paper and you sit down with the person. And if they tally again and say, I can't control it, I can't control it, I can't control it, it's not my fault. That's where I typically tell the owner to step out and actually give the person physical space and say, listen, Sarah, I'm going to go out, get a cup of coffee. I'll be back in 5 minutes. I'm going to think of some options in the coffee room. I'd love for you to think of some options right here. Let's get some physical distance from each other. I'll be back in 5 minutes and then we'll look at each other's options and physically leave the room. Sometimes your presence can be intimidating and can cloud the person's thinking. So physically leaving can actually be super empowering for them. And the second thing is you're showing her, I need business. Like, we are going to talk about solutions. We are not playing blame game here, and we're coming up with options. And I'll be back in 5 minutes.
And I love what you're talking about, because it has an underlining coaching model built into it.
Yeah.
What you're doing is, classically, you're not coming in and you're saying this was the situation and this is what you need to do. You're not providing what I would call is not really leadership. It is an element of just dictatorship. But what you're doing is you're doing a traditional, let's ask a question, let's listen to the response, let's then further peel away the onion, ask more, and keep on pulling it back until you can get to that root cause you were talking about earlier. So I love the idea of what you're saying. Let's discuss what we can control, because then what you're doing is you're putting it into the hands of the director to say is, we can define the things that you do have an element of control over here. And so as much as you want to say it was someone else's fault, there are things that you do have responsibility for, and that's what you're really getting to, but having them admit it as to you telling them.
There's 2 more things of why this is so valuable. One, I want to talk about why it's so hard to do this. So no one should, watching this, feel like a failure, like, oh my God, this is impossible. I want to talk about why it's hard. And then I want to talk about why it's valuable. The reason it's hard is because you're an owner, okay? Which means you're very smart. You're an entrepreneur. You're not stupid, very far from it. Smart people like to fix things because we're smart. Let me sprinkle my magical dust, Boom, problem's fixed. Now let me move on with my life. The problem is with being an owner, you can't fix things. You need to be the navigator. You need to be the coach. You need to be the leader, because as long as you fix things, you will always be fixing things. And if you don't want to be fixing things and you want to be leading, then you have to stop fixing. So I just want to say that the reason it's hard is because you're smart. It's because you're an entrepreneur. It's because you understand business sense. And to you, when the director's saying something, you're like, oh dear God, that's common sense. Why can't you just figure it out? Yeah, I get it. But if you're going to fix problems, that's what you're going to do your whole life. So if that's what you want to do your whole life, be my guest. But if you have bigger things on your plate, which you are because you're watching this, navigating is where you're going to create bigger things in your life. So that's the reason why it's hard.
And I'm glad you brought that up. It's, you really have a very sound approach to this. And I look at, we talked earlier about culture.
Yeah.
Talk about leadership. When I discuss with other owners where they want to be, is do you want to be working on your business or do you want to be working in your business? Now, working on your business doesn't mean that you're not having conversations like this with your director, correct?
Right.
What it simply means is the way you have the conversations, you're having the director discover their responsibilities as to you telling them what their responsibilities are.
Again, it's the system. So it's not how do I motivate the teacher to do the right thing? It's what system, which means what conversation template do I need to follow so that the environment becomes a place where the director comes to me and says, hey, here are the 3 problems that we need to solve. These are the 2 options that I'm thinking about solving them. Which one do you think is best?
Awesome.
That's what you want to get to, right? And then the other reason you want people to come to you with options is because that's how you could see their competency level. Until a person actually, because what happens is with the fixer is as long as you're providing solutions, you can never know how smart your people actually are. But when you open the playing field and you hear their options, you could be like, wow, she's actually a lot smarter than I thought she was. I could give her more ownership. Or, dear God, if those are her options, I really got to protect some of the situation over here, because if I'm going to give her more control, this place is going to go down in flames. But you can't know that until you know their competency. That's why you have to ask for options.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So, one of the things I want to do when we have a couple minutes here, and I want you to keep on going with your model, but I actually want to throw a little scenario at you as if I was a director, and I want to have you help, look at it. And I know that you're game on, you're standing up, you're ready.
Yeah, I'm like booming, here I am.
No, it's awesome. And I love it because you're speaking my language so much that this keeps going.
Yeah.
So with that said, when you get to the point where you're having that difficult conversation, you've asked the director to think about it. What can you control? You've stepped out of the room. You've given them some time. You come back and they still keep on deflecting.
Yep.
They're not absorbing. They're not taking responsibility. They're deflecting. That becomes a tough situation. So, and that's what I sometimes like to do is, how do we deal with it? Because sometimes it's tough to get out of that tough situation. Because I know I can tell you right now, our owners, some of them are dealing with it right now as of today, and they're trying to figure out, I've tried that, and it's not easy because everything isn't perfect. All the theories don't always, come to fruition because you have feelings and emotions, and you have
and humans are complex beings. They don't always show up the way we want them to.
So when you run up against that wall, even though you're working in a very strong model like you're talking about, when you run up against that, what are some of your tools that you pull out of your toolbox to work on these things?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because it's true. The strategies are not always going to work. So there's 2 things that I would say. The first thing is, before I go into kind of how to wrap up the conversation with the teacher or the director who keeps, bumping up again and again. Being reflective as an owner. If you want a mega tool and a mega skill, closing off your day and journaling or scripting how you showed up that day, what personality traits, what attributes, what values really showed up that day. Because if there is anything that separates the amateurs from the high performers, is high performers look at their game film. High performers are reflective. Pro and Olympic athletes watch the game film. professional actors and singers watch their past performances. If you truly want to be a high performer and stop playing at an amateur level, reflect on your days. It could seem monotonous, it could seem boring, and it could seem silly to do that. But if you do that, I promise you, you will be a different person in 90 days from now. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that when the director keeps saying ba 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 and kind of keeps jumping up against you, the way I would kind of wrap up the conversation is say something like, look, Sarah, I could see that you're feeling really strongly about the situation and the way that it is right now. And it's tough. It's really tough. And I'm not going to take that away from you. I'm not going to take away the fact that it's hard and that you feel like everyone was conspiring against you around that thing. Like, I'm not going to take that away from you. What I do want you to be reflective of, and you can answer me now, or this could be a conversation that we continue tomorrow, is even in this crappiest situation that you feel like you're in right now, even in this most difficult moment, who do you want to be in this moment? Who do you want to show up as in this moment? What type of leader do you want to be? And you could think about that, or you can answer me right now, but this is where we're going to close the conversation. What you're doing is you're showing the person, yes, we cannot always engineer and orchestrate the outcome. Of course not. We're not in charge of that. Mother Nature is, God is, whoever, whatever you believe in. But what we do have control over is who I'm going to show up in this moment. And so even in the hardest situation that you're in, and you feel like you're in a really tough situation, I'm not going to take that away from you. But who do you want to show up as? Do you want to show up like you're showing up now? Or do you want to be brave, bold, daring, calm, cool, collective, audacious? Like, who do you want to be?
I love that. I think that's great. If one is being reflective as the owner, two is then asking questions of who you want to show up as. You know, the way I look at it again is conversations are two-way. When you are having a conversation with the director and it's a responsibility issue or it's a blame issue that we're lack of responsibility, I think oftentimes people do put up a wall. The immediate reaction is to put a big wall up. What I've noticed from my own experiences and my approaches to coaching is trying to take down those walls from, yes, being reflective of, have I been the best I have been, or have I been overly reactive? Have I come in and all of a sudden she was working her business and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm changing what you're talking about. You know, I'm not bringing it to my agenda. And I created an opportunity for blame. So if I look at that reflective, like you're talking about, I think there's an opportunity to go is, you know what? Like when you're saying who you want to show up as, I also think there's an opportunity to probably say as an owner, you know, when I first approached this, it also caught me off guard as the owner. And because it caught me off guard, I was probably pretty quick with you. But I want to let you know that the reason we're having a conversation of this nature is because I think that there's a real opportunity to work through this, but we both have to look at what we can do together of what's in our control, like you said earlier. So I think there's a real opportunity to, and I've always called it like when you're having conversations of this nature, you're having a negotiation, but instead of it being like a labor negotiation when one person's on one side of the table and the other person's on this side of the table, you're both on this side of the table working on the problem, which is on the other side of the table. So I think what you're talking about being reflective as an owner and then having you say is, how do you want to show up? You can also help guide that a bit as an owner by saying, you know, together you're working together to solve this problem. We're not seeing a person issue. It's just a problem that we need to solve together. So I think it's a good.
And I love your thing because I always say all the time, one of the strategies with accountability is change seats. So actually switch seats with the person. So I tell this to directors all the time when the teacher's like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know. Okay, well, let's switch seats. I'm going to sit in your seat. You come sit in my seat. And if you were the director, how would you solve the problem?
Sure.
So I love that. I say all the time, like change seats, I think is super powerful. And we have just a ton more strategies here in this little guide over here that we'll give to we'll give access to everyone too as well.
Okay, great. So. And I would like to do is in a few minutes just show that to you. So I'm just going to hit you up with a really quick one, and we're going to just do a real quick role play. Okay.
You got it.
All right. So, you know, you came to me because you noticed that leads are not getting entered into the CRM. And I know that you came to me and, you know, what you had asked me as my director, and I'm the assistant director, let's say, is, you were expecting for me when we got call-ins to be putting leads in the CRM. And I'm like, well, Chanie, every time, I get these leads coming in, I have, I'm doing breaks. I'm doing all afternoon breaks. And then I have to go and I have to clean the dishes from lunch. And then after that, our system is oftentimes down. I don't know when you expect me to do this, but I can't stay after hours. That I have to go take care of my grandmother. So, I really don't know what you're expecting of me, but, it'll get done. I'm just not sure when it's going to get done.
So what's your name again?
My name's Tony.
Tony. Okay, fine. No, because I like using it in the conversation. Okay. So thanks. No. You know what I meant.
Yeah, of course I did. I'm just joking with you too.
Yeah. So Tony, let me just make sure I understand what it is that you're telling me. You feel that one of the struggles of getting the leads into the childcare CRM is because it's a time issue. You're not finding the block of time to put that in. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And so you feel like one of the reasons that the time constraint is because you're always being pulled into some of the classrooms.
Yeah, I feel that I'm pulling the classrooms, or I'm being asked, I have to clean up the dishes, or sometimes I just get a feeling that you're going to have to, have me stay after hours to do something.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing again is that maybe you feel like I haven't been clear about the boundaries between work and home, and you feel like if work isn't done, I might tell you, hey, you have to stay after hours. Is that something that you're worried about?
I think, yeah, it might be one of the things, because I feel that boundary's been, taken advantage of at times. But I also, I'm realistic too about the fact that, hey, I know that it's a priority, but, in all candor though, I'm not sure why it's the biggest deal in the world.
So if we're looking at priorities in the day, for you, what would be the biggest priority that you find in your day? Because from what I'm hearing from what you just said is you don't feel that putting leads into the CRM is something that truly comes on the highest bucket, which is fine. I just want to hear what are some of the priorities that you do think are important in your day as a director.
Sure. Well, we've got to stay in ratio all the time. So,
Okay.
My objective is to make sure that all the leads breaks, and that they get, the supplies that they need. And that, so that's my number one priority, is to make sure that that's happening.
Yeah. And do you feel like that takes up like basically your whole day? Like you're always running in those different directions?
Well, I think for the most part, but I'm not exactly sure I'm using the day as efficiently as I could. But I do think that it takes up, it takes up a lot of my day. And I know that we have downtime and stuff like that. But I also guess that, it's a confusing system, the CRM.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a couple of things here, because I want to pause before we move on. So perhaps there might
be in the background who's about.
Yeah, I know. 1 second. We got the art center there in the back, and she wanted all the.
I was just worried she was going to make the leap.
I know, right? She leaps all the time. Anyways, you need help getting over the chair. Could you help her get over the chair? Okay, thanks. Totally lost my train of thought. Okay, so what I think I'm hearing is, and again, I just want to replay back to you, is perhaps there is some confusion in the day, and maybe we could create some more efficiency in the way that you're showing up. And the other thing is you feel that the system is confusing. So my question is, which problem do you want to tackle first? Do you want to tackle creating some efficiency in the day and maybe seeing if there's certain time blocks that you can actually do CRM? Or do you feel like you want to learn how to use the system better?
Awesome. And we'll go offline, Chanie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could go on forever, but
that was perfect.
Sorry, you go.
No. You're using the model that you just talked about. And I guess what I'm pointing out to owners is, the thing that I liked about what you were doing right there is you kept on exploring. You kept on peeling away the onion. When you were getting, things that started as blame, you started peeling it back and started getting towards that root cause. Yes. And, sometimes, but I also felt that when you were talking, that you were putting me in a bit of a safe zone, where it wasn't attacking and saying like, I don't oftentimes ask you to stay after work.
There you go. Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You didn't come after me with that. You're just like, okay, so that might be an issue. So let's parking lot that one, or let's talk about that one. Which one do you want to talk about first? And let's drive the conversation, because what you also did was you gave me as much respect as you expect me to give you. And I think,
and I love what you said, that I didn't blame, because again, that's immediately put her back in the mirror that she would blame right back.
yes, absolutely. And that, I think, is really critical, and so let's bring it back up, and we can bring this more to a bit of a summary right now.
Yeah.
And know that we sort of, hey, listen, we only have so many times on these webcasts and what have you. We want to make them very useful and inviting, that you could take some elements away.
Yeah.
But, one of the things we started with the idea of culture. We started with the thing that everything is culture. And then we look at how does culture happen? It happens through communications. We talk about parent and staff communications. And then sub to that, we talk about responsibility and how to make sure that there's accountability and responsibility. And then we really got to what you discussed were the 4 shields of the conversation. So it's crying, blaming, victimhood, and what was the last one?
Deflection.
Deflection. Yes. One of my favorites. So, how to look at how do you re-enter the conversation? How do you re-engage the conversation when the conversation has, in the sense of the word of that book, the conversation has become crucial. So blame as to accountability. You talked about that, and you really talked about the fact that, it's critical to be, accountable, but realistically, oftentimes that you have to watch out for where blame is going and how blame is being portrayed. Are you part of the problem as the leader? Like we just went over, are you coming in and are you setting a tone for blaming throughout your organization? And that is a really tough thing, because you're playing with the owner's playing with their ego right now.
Pride always guards the exit.
Exactly.
Always.
So realistically, as an owner, what we struggle with is it's so tough to put our ego down for a moment and self-evaluate, going, as you mentioned later on about reflecting as an owner, are you helping establish an environment of blame because you're coming at them hard and they have a defense mechanism? Again, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basics are right there, self-preservation. They want to, hold on to themselves. But what I also liked about what you said too is the fact of not only getting beyond responsibility, but culture that is data measured as to feeling measured.
Yes.
I love the idea of the fact that you can tell it's one thing, like I do on my leadership calls at the end of every weekly leadership call. I always ask, what is the morale of the center? To all my leaders, I have a once a week call. I had one this morning. And I say, what is the morale? And I watch it climb up or down. And then I call it out once in a while. And I say, I just did an anonymous survey last week. You said you have a 9. You actually have a 4. Everybody responded back. Literally, it's a 4. So what we've done is we've become very honest with those elements with ourselves, because there's no value. You can't go up if you don't admit where you are and you don't get to that root cause. So the last things, you talked about is let's have a discussion of what we could control together. You as the director, you as the teacher, me as the owner, what can we control? Being reflective, and how are you going to show up? So I think it's, for the short period of time together, I think you covered some amazing ground here, Chanie.
Thanks.
And, I know that you showed me a document earlier with some things, and I know you were thinking about being able to provide something for them.
Yep. So people could actually just go to chanie.me/4 shields, and they'll be able to get the resource right over there. It's just everything is there. It gives you scripts, gives you some templates. We do a little scenario. It's got a bunch of really great stuff. So chanie.me/4 shields.
And we are going to, at the end of this video, you'll see an exit screen with Chanie's information and contact information. And what we're likely going to have there is a little bit of a form. You can actually, what we're going to do is set it up where you can just either click on it or click on a link below. And what that's going to do is have just a little form that you can fill out, and it's going to go right to Chanie, and she's going to have an opportunity then to be really responsive to you and just basically have a conversation with you. If it makes sense, that what she's talked about can be helpful, great. If it's not, then maybe someone else that could be helpful too. So, Chanie, I really appreciate the time that you've taken to help our members, as well as some of our prospective universe here of people who are swirling around the Inspire Care 360 culture universe. And I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this, and if it's helpful and it helps create better cultures and organizations, which ultimately reflects our kids who we all really care about, then I've done my job. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, you've done a great job. Thank you so much. And for all of our members in our continuing series of bringing subject matter experts to you, we always look for your guidance as to what you want to hear more about. This is a topic that I have heard from a number of different owners and our members, that not only are they looking to engage their staff more, but they're also looking for some of the tactical techniques to do it beyond just the hiring, recruiting, life cycle elements of managing to values. So this is a great opportunity to talk about, one that is very finite and blaming. So with that, we're going to sign off and want to thank everybody for participating today. Have a great day.